He was silent for a long moment, and when he spoke again, it was softer, tinged with guilt. I know, Mom, I know. I've messed up. But please, I need you to be there for me, for us. Veronica sighed. She didn't want to get pulled back into the chaos, but she knew what it was like to feel lost. She wasn't about to abandon her son again. All right, I'll come, she said, but I need you to be honest with me from now on, Jacob. No more lies, no more hiding things. If you want my help, I need the truth. The truth about Olivia. When Veronica arrived at the police station later that day, she saw Jacob pacing anxiously outside. His shoulders slumped, his face drawn with worry. She couldn't help but feel a wave of empathy for him. Despite everything that had happened, he was still her son, and he was still in pain. Mom, he said when he saw her, I'm so glad you're here. They've already spoken to Olivia. She's not saying much. I don't know if she's scared or if she's guilty, but Jacob trailed off, looking at his shoes, too ashamed to meet her gaze. It's okay, Veronica said, placing a hand on his shoulder. Let's see her. When they entered the room, Olivia was sitting in a chair, her head bent low. Her once pristine appearance was now tarnished by the stress of her situation. Veronica couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction at seeing her humbled, but she quickly reminded herself that this was not the time for petty emotions. Olivia was still part of Jacob's life, and this was a turning point for their family. As Veronica sat across from Olivia, she couldn't ignore the deep sense of betrayal that still simmered beneath her calm exterior. But she had been through enough to know that emotions like anger and revenge wouldn't help anything. Olivia, Veronica said quietly. What happened? Olivia lifted her head slowly, her eyes red and puffy. She looked like a woman broken. I didn't mean for it to get this far, she whispered, her voice shaking. I thought I could handle everything. I thought I could make us rich. But then things spiraled out of control. What are you talking about? Veronica asked, her voice cold but steady. What did you do? Olivia broke down in tears, sobbing uncontrollably. I was involved in a scam. It started small. Just a little fraud here and there, replacing prescriptions, selling medication. But then I got too greedy, and I dragged Jacob into it. I made him call the pharmacy, get the prescriptions for you. I didn't mean for things to go this far, but I couldn't stop. Jacob stared at Olivia in shock, unable to comprehend the depths of her betrayal. You lied to me. You made me part of your schemes. I'm so sorry, Olivia whispered, her voice barely audible. I was desperate. I thought I could make everything better, but I made it worse. Now I've ruined everything. Veronica's heart ached for Jacob. He had been a pawn in Olivia's game, but this was the first step toward healing for him. As difficult as it was, the truth was the only way forward. The road ahead, the authorities soon took over, investigating the full extent of Olivia's fraudulent activities. Jacob worked with them, offering his cooperation, though it was clear he still struggled with the guilt of his involvement. Veronica remained by his side, supporting him through his turmoil. It wasn't easy, but she could see the light in his eyes returning. It was painful, but necessary for Jacob to face the consequences of his actions. He needed to understand that the choices he made had real consequences, not just for him, but for everyone he loved. Veronica's own journey of healing continued. She knew she would never forget the betrayal, but the scar tissue from that wound had begun to heal. As she spent more time helping Jacob and his family rebuild their lives, she found herself finally letting go of the anger that had once consumed her. A new beginning months later. Veronica sat on the porch of her new home, feeling the warmth of the morning sun on her face. She had learned so much from the ordeal about trust, betrayal, forgiveness, and resilience. Jacob had moved into a small apartment, determined to rebuild his life with a clearer understanding of who he was and what he had done. Olivia, on the other hand, faced a lengthy prison sentence for her crimes, though Veronica knew that even prison wouldn't undo the damage she had caused. But despite everything, Veronica found peace in knowing she had given Jacob the chance to change. She had given him the support he needed, even when it was the hardest thing she'd ever done. Looking out over her garden, she felt hopeful. She had survived the worst. She had learned to forgive not for Olivia's sake, but for her own. Veronica was stronger than ever, ready for whatever came next. The journey wasn't over, but she was ready for it. This time, she was in control. The aftermath: Jacob and Olivia were both arrested. The authorities investigated, and it was revealed that Olivia had been working with a criminal network to fraudulently alter medications for wealthy clients. Jacob, devastated by the truth, pled guilty to his role in the crime. Though he was later given a lighter sentence due to his cooperation, Veronica, heartbroken but stronger than ever, reclaimed control of her life and finances. She moved out of Jacob's house and started a new chapter, one where she could finally trust again. Not everyone. Speaking out several months later, Veronica found herself standing in front of a small but engaged audience at a local community center, sharing her story. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. She knew that every word she spoke could potentially save someone else from falling victim to the same betrayal she had endured. As she spoke about her experience, about the feeling of being betrayed by her own son and daughter-in-law, the audience listened in rapt silence. She could see their faces reflecting the horror she had felt when she first learned the truth. "I never imagined this could happen to me. I trusted my son and his wife with everything," Veronica said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "But I want to tell you all that it is possible to recover from something like this. It may feel like the world is falling apart, but there is always a way back. You are stronger than you know." There was a quiet moment of reflection in the room as the audience absorbed her words. Then, a woman in the front row raised her hand. I've been in a similar situation," the woman said, her voice trembling. "I didn't think anyone would believe me. I didn't think I could get out of it." Veronica smiled warmly. "You can. It might take time, but you will get through it. And there are people who will help you." The woman nodded, her eyes full of tears. Veronica could see the relief in her face, knowing that sharing her experience had helped someone else. After the seminar, Veronica was approached by a few more people, all sharing their own stories of manipulation or elder abuse. It was then that Veronica realized just how many people suffered in silence, afraid to speak out or unable to recognize the manipulation in their own lives. A new life. Veronica's public speaking continued over the months. She collaborated with local advocacy groups to raise awareness about elder abuse, financial manipulation, and the importance of protecting vulnerable family members. She became an advocate for senior rights, using her experience as both a cautionary tale and a source of empowerment for others. But even as her life changed and her purpose deepened, she still had moments of quiet reflection. It wasn't easy, and she still thought about Jacob, her son, often. He had been manipulated just as she had. He had been a victim, too, but in a different way. Veronica had forgiven him. She knew that what happened wasn't entirely his fault, though it was hard to separate his actions from the betrayal. She had been in touch with him sporadically. He was in therapy, trying to heal, but Veronica had come to accept that their relationship would never be the same. The damage had been done, but she still held hope that one day they could rebuild their bond. After all, he was her son, and no matter what had happened, she would always love him. A future filled with hope. As spring turned into summer, Veronica found herself enjoying life more than she had in years. She spent weekends gardening, baking, and hosting gatherings with friends she had met through her public speaking events. She started to reconnect with old friends who had stood by her during the dark days of the past year. They all marveled at how strong she had become, how she had transformed her pain into purpose. One afternoon, while sitting in her garden with a cup of tea, Veronica reflected on the life she had fought so hard to reclaim. She thought about all the things she had once taken for granted: her family, her health, and her peace of mind. She had almost lost it all, but now she had found a new sense of purpose. Her journey hadn't been easy, but it had made her stronger. The pain of betrayal had been replaced by the strength of understanding, the clarity of truth, and the power of self-reliance. And as she looked out over the vibrant flowers in her garden, Veronica realized that while the past would always be a part of her, it no longer controlled her. The future was hers to shape. She had survived the worst, and now she could finally live her best life. A moment of peace. The sun was low in the sky, casting an orange hue across Veronica's front yard. It had been a year since she'd first stood in front of an audience, telling her story and exposing the painful truths of betrayal and manipulation. Now, sitting on her porch, sipping a freshly brewed cup of chamomile tea, she could feel the weight of everything that had happened slowly lifting. The house, which had once felt like a place of quiet sorrow, had transformed into her sanctuary, a space where she could breathe freely and finally begin to heal. Her garden had flourished, the flowers vibrant with life, and the vegetables she'd carefully planted growing tall, promising a summer harvest. It wasn't just the physical growth of the plants that filled her with peace, but the symbolic growth within herself. Each petal, each new sprout, was a reminder of her own resilience and the journey she'd taken from fear and betrayal to empowerment and clarity. For the first time in years, Veronica truly felt at peace. She reflected on how far she'd come, not just physically, but emotionally. The anger she had once felt for Jacob, for Olivia, had faded into something quieter: sadness, perhaps, but not bitterness. It was almost as if the sting of the betrayal had become a distant memory, one that didn't hurt anymore. She'd learned to forgive herself and, in some ways, forgive Jacob, even if they would never fully return to the way things were. Her phone buzzed beside her, pulling her out of her reverie. It was a message from Mark. "How's the speaking gig going? Can't wait to hear more from you soon. You're changing lives, Veronica." Veronica smiled. Mark had become more than just a friend. He had become a confidant. Over the months, they had shared so many conversations about their lives, their hopes, and their fears. Mark had been her rock during those early days of uncertainty, and now he was celebrating her victories with her. She typed a quick reply, "It's going great. One life at a time, right? You've been a big part of this too, Mark. I couldn't have done it without you." A call for help. The peace Veronica had fought so hard to attain was soon disrupted when she received an unexpected phone call. It was early one Saturday morning, and the voice on the other end was familiar, though she hadn't heard it in months. Veronica's heart dropped into her stomach as she recognized Jacob's voice. It had been weeks since their last conversation, and she had no idea what to expect now. "Jacob, what's wrong?" she asked, trying to steady her voice. I need your help," he said, his tone frantic. "It's Olivia. She's in trouble, Mom. They arrested her. They're saying she was involved in something much bigger." I don't know what to do." Veronica's mind raced. This was the last thing she expected. After everything, Olivia was still a part of Jacob's life. But Veronica had no room for sympathy for her. "What happened?" she asked, her voice cold despite the anxiety rising inside her. "What is she involved in?" Jacob's voice cracked. "I don't know all the details yet. I need you to help me. Olivia's in jail. They're accusing her of fraud, abuse. Mom, I didn't know, I swear. She's been keeping things from me, too. She's been hiding things, but now they're saying she was part of a bigger scheme. She could go to prison for a long time." Veronica paused, her heart heavy. She had known something like this would happen, but hearing it from Jacob, hearing him admit the truth, was still difficult to process. Her instincts screamed at her to turn away. But the mother in her, the one who had once forgiven him, knew she couldn't leave him hanging. "I'll help you, Jacob," she said, her voice steady but firm. "But I need you to understand something. This isn't just about Olivia anymore. It's about you, too. You've been involved in this. You let it happen." The unsettling dinner. Veronica Hawk had always been a careful woman. At 58, she had lived through enough life to understand the value of caution. But nothing could have prepared her for the chilling encounter that started on an ordinary Thursday evening. It was a cool autumn night, and Veronica had been invited to dinner at her son Jacob's house to celebrate her 58th birthday. It was supposed to be a simple family gathering, just Jacob, his wife Olivia, and their 2 kids. The table was set beautifully, and the aroma of home-cooked lasagna filled the room. Jacob poured her a glass of Chardonnay, and they all clinked glasses, a soft smile playing on his lips. "Mom, you look fantastic tonight. Can't believe you're already 58. Veronica smiled and raised her glass. "I'm still here, still going strong." The conversation turned to the usual family topics. Jacob talked about work, and Olivia, his wife, occasionally interjected, her smile thin but polite. Veronica noticed that Olivia seemed distracted, always fiddling with her phone beneath the table. But she dismissed it at first, assuming Olivia had just had a busy day. But as the night went on, Veronica's unease grew. There was something in Olivia's behavior, something subtle, something just off. She kept glancing at Veronica, but not with warmth. No, her gaze was calculating, waiting. Veronica tried to ignore it, but it lingered in the back of her mind. The strange note dinner passed in a blur. Veronica laughed at Jacob's jokes, enjoyed the lasagna, but the entire time, a strange sense of discomfort had crept into her heart. As they finished their meal, Veronica felt a sudden urge to go to the bathroom. She excused herself and stood up, making her way toward the hall. As she passed by the dining table, something caught her eye. A small piece of paper had been slipped underneath her plate. Her heart skipped a beat. Had someone left this here intentionally? She hesitated for a moment, then quickly folded the paper open, her eyes scanning the words. "Don't take your medication tonight. It's not safe. Trust no one." Veronica's breath caught in her throat. She read the note again, her fingers trembling. What was this? Who had left it? Was it some sick joke? She looked around, but no one seemed to have noticed her reaction. The note had no signature, no explanation, just a warning, and a cryptic one at that. She slid the note into her pocket, her mind racing. She wasn't sure if she should be frightened or if this was some kind of prank. But what was it referring to? Her medication. Veronica had been on prescribed blood pressure medication for years, and she trusted her doctor and pharmacist completely. There was no reason to suspect anything was wrong, but that night, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The doubt creeps in the next morning. Veronica went about her day as usual, but the unease from the night before hadn't left her. The note kept echoing in her mind. Don't take your medication. Trust no one. She tried to put it out of her mind. It had to be a mistake. But the more she thought about it, the more suspicious she became. Had Jacob or Olivia left the note? Were they involved somehow? The thought made her stomach churn. Jacob had always been her loving son, but could he be hiding something from her? And Olivia. Olivia had always seemed to be a little too perfect, a little too eager to please. She had to be sure. She called the pharmacy where she filled her prescriptions. The pharmacist, Mark, was a long-time friend and someone she trusted implicitly. "Hello, Mark. It's Veronica Hawk. I just wanted to check on something," she said, trying to sound casual, of course. "Veronica, what can I do for you? I just wanted to confirm that my prescriptions are all up to date. I've been feeling a little off lately and thought I should double-check." "Let me pull up your file," Mark said, his voice light and easy. "1 second." Veronica waited, feeling the tension building in her chest. She had no idea what she expected to find, but something about the situation felt increasingly sinister. Mark's voice came back on the line. "Veronica, everything looks great on my end. Your prescriptions are right where they should be. You're still on the same medications. No changes." Veronica sighed in relief, but something still didn't feel right. "Are you sure? No errors or discrepancies?" "Nope, no discrepancies," Mark replied, oblivious to the storm brewing in Veronica's mind, the revelation that evening. Veronica sat at her kitchen table, staring at the prescription bottles in front of her. The note still burned in her pocket. "Don't take your medication." It was a warning, and she needed to understand why. She reviewed each bottle carefully. Her blood pressure pills, her migraine medication, but something caught her eye. One of the bottles wasn't quite right. It was a bottle of sleeping pills that she didn't remember filling. She had no prescription for anything that should have been there. Veronica's heart began to pound in her chest. Her hand trembled as she unscrewed the cap. The pills inside were unfamiliar, nothing like the ones she usually took. She checked the label again, but it seemed off. The pharmacy name was right, but the date on the label was new to New Dot. It was then that she realized the truth. The medication had been switched. Someone had tampered with her prescriptions. Someone was trying to make her ill, or worse, trying to kill her slowly. The investigation Veronica knew she had to act fast. But who could she trust? Who had done this to her? Her first thought was Jacob. He had been acting strangely the last few weeks, distracted and preoccupied with something. And then there was Olivia. Veronica's mind raced back to her strange behavior at dinner. Had she known about the tampered medication? Had she been involved in some way? The more Veronica thought about it, the more she realized that the only person who could have known about her prescriptions was Jacob. He had access to her personal files, her medications. But Olivia, she was a wild card. Veronica had always suspected something about her, but now those suspicions seemed more valid than ever. Veronica couldn't confront Jacob yet, not until she knew more. But she needed to talk to Mark at the pharmacy. She called him the next morning, her voice trembling. "Mark, I need your help," she said urgently. "I think someone's been tampering with my prescriptions." Mark's voice faltered. "What do you mean?" "I found sleeping pills in my medication, pills that weren't mine. They were swapped in with my regular prescriptions." There was a long pause on the line. "I need to report this to the authorities," Mark said finally. "I'll help you file a report, Veronica. But we need to look into this further. Let me check my records." The confrontation Mark discovered that someone had been calling the pharmacy on Veronica's behalf, requesting refills and making changes to her prescription. The calls came from a number that Veronica didn't recognize, but when Mark traced it, it led straight to her son Jacob's cell phone. Veronica's heart sank. That evening, she decided she couldn't wait any longer. She needed answers. Jacob was at home when she arrived. She walked straight into the living room, her gaze sharp, her body tense. "Jacob, we need to talk," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. Jacob looked up, confusion in his eyes. "Mom, what's going on? I know what you've been doing. I know about the phone calls to the pharmacy. I know you've been tampering with my prescriptions." Jacob's face drained of color. He stood up quickly, but didn't say anything. "Jacob, why?" Veronica's voice cracked as she asked the question. "Why would you do this to me?" Jacob finally spoke, his voice trembling. "I didn't mean for it to get this far, Mom. I was trying to protect you, Olivia. She wanted to make sure you weren't in control anymore. She said that if we could get you to the point where you were confused or incapacitated, we could get access to your estate. I didn't want to do it, but she convinced me." Veronica's breath caught in her throat. The betrayal was unbearable. Olivia had been behind it all, using Jacob as her pawn to secure control of her money. She had been poisoning her slowly, taking advantage of her trust. The road to reconciliation the first few months after the trial were a blur. While the legal proceedings had ended, the emotional healing was only just beginning. For Marcus and me, the trauma of betrayal was still a heavy weight to carry. But we were making progress, slowly. One day at a time, I found comfort in small things, tending to my garden, watching the sun set over the horizon, and spending quiet evenings with Marcus. The most profound healing came from those late-night conversations we had, where we spoke honestly about the pain we had both experienced. I could see the guilt still hanging over Marcus. He had been so sure that Allison was the right one for him that he had failed to see the signs. The moments of doubt, the subtle manipulations, he had thought they were just quirks. He had trusted her, and in doing so, he had let her poison our family. but it wasn't his fault. I reminded him of that constantly. He had been manipulated, just as I had. One evening, as we sat together on the back porch, Marcus spoke softly, his voice tinged with the same guilt he'd been carrying for months. "Mom, I've been thinking about everything. About how I ignored all the signs. How I let her manipulate me. I feel so stupid." I took his hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "Marcus, you were deceived. It's not your fault." She was a master at hiding her true self. She knew exactly how to play us. But we're moving past that now. We're stronger, you and me, and we'll get through this together. Marcus nodded, but I could see the burden still weighing him down. He was working on forgiving himself, but it was a slow process. He would get there, I knew. Healing wasn't a straight line. It had its ups and downs. But as long as we stayed connected, we would find our way. Jada's role, a lifeline Jada, had been more than just the waitress who had saved my life. Over the past year, she had become a dear friend and ally. She had stuck by me through the darkest moments, and I had come to rely on her wisdom and strength. She was a remarkable young woman, strong, determined, and compassionate, and we often talked about the case, the trauma, and the healing process. But it wasn't just about the past anymore. We had both moved forward. Jada had started her nursing degree, and I had promised to help her however I could. It felt good to be able to give back, to take the support she had offered me and pay it forward. Every time we sat down together, she would tell me about her studies, her plans for the future, and the new opportunities she was finding. "I'm thinking about specializing in geriatric care," she told me one day as we sat at a local cafe. "I want to help elderly people, make sure they don't go through what you went through. I want to help them maintain their dignity and independence." I was moved by her words. It had been a painful journey for me. But hearing that Jada had found her calling because of what she had witnessed gave me a sense of purpose. It was as if something good had come out of the darkness. "That's wonderful, Jada," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "You'll make an incredible difference in the world. I'm so proud of you." Her eyes shone with determination. "You've inspired me, Celeste. Watching you fight for your life, watching you refuse to be defined by what happened, made me want to help others do the same." Rebuilding trust. Marcus' new relationship. As the months passed, I noticed a change in Marcus. He seemed lighter, less burdened by the guilt that had consumed him for so long. And then, something unexpected happened. Marcus met someone new. Her name was Sarah, and she was kind, patient, and understanding. She had a warmth about her that immediately put me at ease. At first I was cautious. I wasn't sure how I felt about Marcus moving on so soon. But I could see the happiness in his eyes whenever he spoke about Sarah. She was a woman who genuinely cared for him, and that was something I could respect. One evening, after Marcus and Sarah had been dating for a few months, he invited me to dinner with her. It was awkward at first, as I tried to navigate this new chapter of Marcus's life. But Sarah made it easy. She was warm, engaging, and genuinely interested in getting to know me. We talked about everything from family traditions to hobbies, and by the end of the evening, I could see why Marcus had fallen for her. After dinner, as Marcus and Sarah said their goodbyes, Sarah pulled me aside. "I just want you to know, Celeste," she said, her voice sincere. "I know what you've been through, and I admire your strength. Marcus has been through a lot, but he's a good man. I'll take care of him." I smiled, touched by her words. "Thank you, Sarah. That means more to me than you know." A final farewell closure with Alessandro, though it was difficult. I knew that in order to fully heal, I had to let go of the anger and resentment I still held toward Allison. She had tried to destroy me, but I couldn't let her actions control my life any longer. One day, I received a letter from Allison, sent from prison. It was brief, but the tone was unmistakable. She didn't apologize for what she had done. Instead, she complained about the prison conditions, and the letter ended with a line that made me laugh. "Despite everything, I hope you appreciate the favor I tried to do you." Even in her downfall, she still saw herself as the victim, as the misunderstood savior. It was a sad, twisted reflection of who she truly was. I didn't keep the letter. I burned it in the fireplace that night, watching the words vanish into smoke. It was a symbolic act, a final severing of the ties that had bound me to her, a new chapter, embracing the future. As the years passed, I found myself embracing a new chapter of my life. I had left behind the toxic memories of the past and built a future that was mine. I was no longer the woman who had been manipulated and betrayed. I was Celeste Montgomery, a survivor, a warrior, and someone who refused to let her circumstances define her. Marcus and I had grown closer than we ever had before. We spoke openly about everything, the pain, the healing, and the future. There was no more guilt, no more fear. We had found peace. Jada continued her studies, and we kept in touch regularly. She was making a difference in the world, one life at a time, and I was proud to call her my friend. As for me, I spent my days enjoying the simple things, painting, and spending time with the people I loved. I had learned to live in the moment, to appreciate the beauty around me, and to cherish every day I had. One evening, as I sat on my porch, watching the sun set over the lake, I thought back to everything I had been through. The pain, the betrayal, the fear, it had all been a part of my journey. But it no longer had power over me. I had reclaimed my life. The final confrontation in the end, it wasn't just about the wine. It was about everything that had happened before and after that night. I had almost lost my life to someone I had trusted, but in a strange way, I had been saved by a simple act of kindness from a waitress who saw through the facade, a stranger who had risked everything to help me. The truth had come to light, and the nightmare had ended. The final confrontation came when Allison was arrested and charged for her actions. She had tried to manipulate my son, manipulate our entire family for her own selfish gain, but she had failed. Chapter 11. A new perspective. Weeks passed, but the events of that night at Giovanni's Trattoria stayed with me. I had always considered myself a strong woman, capable of handling whatever life threw my way. But what I had gone through had shaken me to my core. The trust I had placed in Allison, my daughter-in-law, had been shattered. Not only did I have to come to terms with the fact that someone so close to me had betrayed me, but I also had to rebuild the relationship I had with Marcus. Marcus, my son, had been devastated. He couldn't believe that the woman he had married, the woman he had trusted, had been plotting to destroy his family. The guilt that weighed on him was almost unbearable. I watched as he tried to make sense of it all, often blaming himself for not seeing the signs sooner. We spent long nights talking about everything, the past, the present, and the uncertain future. There were moments when Marcus questioned how he could have been so blind, and I could only reassure him that none of this was his fault. Allison had played the role of the perfect wife, the perfect daughter. She had manipulated everyone around her, including me, but one thing I had learned through it all was the power of forgiveness. I wasn't sure I was ready to forgive Allison for what she had done, but I knew that I couldn't let this poison my relationship with Marcus. He needed me just as much as I needed him. The police report, new evidence. The police had done their part. They had gathered the evidence, conducted the interviews, and built a case against Allison. The medical records showed that the medications found in her system were intentionally administered, and the police had traced the origins of those medications to a source that led straight to Allison in a surprising twist. It turned out that Allison had been involved in a similar case years before. A woman named Eleanor Washington, an elderly woman who had been under Allison's care, had died under mysterious circumstances. At first, her family had thought it was just old age, but Jada Reynolds, the waitress who had saved my life, had suspected something more sinister. After her grandmother's death, Jada had started connecting the dots and had spent years gathering evidence to expose Allison. When Jada approached the police with her suspicions, they opened a full investigation linking the two cases. The more they uncovered, the more horrifying it became. Allison had been using her position as a caregiver to slowly kill elderly patients, all for their money. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. To think that the woman I had invited into my home, who had been part of our family for years, was responsible for such heinous acts. But the truth was undeniable. The trial, justice, or revenge. The day of the trial arrived. I stood in the courtroom with Marcus by my side. My hands were clammy, my heart racing. This was the moment of truth. Would Allison be held accountable for what she had done? Would she pay for trying to take my life and for her other victims? The trial was intense. The prosecution laid out the evidence in detail, showing how Allison had carefully manipulated everyone around her. They presented the medical reports, the phone records, the forged documents, and the testimonies from the police and Jada. I sat there, staring at Allison in the defendant's chair. She looked so different, now pale, gaunt, and empty. The woman I had once called family was gone. In her place was someone who had destroyed everything in her path for the sake of power and control. Allison tried to defend herself, claiming that she had only wanted what was best for me and that the medications had been part of a health plan she had devised to make my life easier. But no one was buying it. The evidence was too overwhelming. When it was my turn to testify, I stood up and walked to the witness stand. My voice was steady, but inside I was shaking. I told the jury everything. I told them about the note, about the wine, about the sudden illness that had almost taken my life. I described how I had felt betrayed by someone I had trusted, someone I had considered a part of my family. And I told them about the moment I had realized that Allison wasn't just trying to take my life, she was planning to make my death look natural. The verdict courtroom was silent as the jury deliberated. It felt like an eternity before they returned with the verdict. The tension in the room was palpable as the judge read aloud the charges against Allison. Guilty, the judge said, his voice steady but firm. Allison's face remained expressionless as the verdict was read. She had been convicted of attempted murder, elder abuse, and fraud. The jury had also found her guilty of causing the deaths of 2 other elderly women under her care. The room erupted in murmurs. I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me, but it was mixed with a deep sadness. Justice had been served, but the damage had already been done. Allison would spend the rest of her life in prison, but the scars she had left on our family would never fully heal. Healing, rebuilding what was lost in the weeks that followed. I was rebuilding piece by piece. The betrayal that had rocked my world was still fresh in my mind, but I was determined to move forward. I had to. Marcus and I spent more time together, working through the pain of the past. We attended therapy sessions as a family, and over time I could see the healing process taking root. Marcus had been consumed by guilt, believing that he had failed me, but I reassured him that he had done nothing wrong. Allison had manipulated us all, and none of us had seen it coming. But now we were stronger. We had each other, and that was all that mattered. The aftermath, a new beginning year passed. My life had changed in ways I never imagined. I had moved into a new home, far from the place where Allison had tried to destroy me. It was a fresh start, a chance to rebuild my life without the constant fear and manipulation that had once consumed me. I also began working with Jada Reynolds, the waitress who had saved my life. We had become close friends, and she had become a passionate advocate for elderly abuse awareness. Together, we spoke at local organizations, raising awareness about the dangers of elder abuse and the importance of protecting vulnerable members of society. Marcus had met someone new, a wonderful woman named Sarah, and they were building their own life together. It was hard for me to see him move on, but I knew it was for the best. He had suffered enough, and now it was time for him to find his own happiness. I was also finding my own peace. I had started painting again, something I hadn't done in years. My garden flourished, and I spent countless hours tending to the flowers and vegetables that gave me comfort. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine, and for the first time in a long time, I felt free. Epilogue. A new dawn, the sun rose each day, casting its warm light over my new home. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly alive. The fear, the doubt, the betrayal, they had all faded into the past. I had survived, and I was stronger than ever, every day. I woke up with the knowledge that I was in control of my life, my decisions, and my future. The woman who had once tried to destroy me had failed. I was no longer a victim. I was a warrior, and as I stood on my porch, watching the sun rise over the horizon, I knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter in my life. A special night. It was a calm, cool Friday evening, the kind of evening where the sun dipped just low enough to give everything a golden glow, and the atmosphere felt light, almost as though it was wrapped in a blanket of comfort. I, Celeste Montgomery, was celebrating my 60th birthday with my family at Giovanni's Trattoria. It was the quaint Italian restaurant down the street from our house, the one I had frequented for years. It had become my place, my comfort zone. My son, Marcus, had always been attentive to me, but this time there was something more. Maybe it was because I had reached this milestone, or perhaps it was because he had noticed how quickly time was slipping through our fingers. Either way, he made sure everything was perfect for me. He'd ordered a bottle of my favorite Cabernet Sauvignon, and the family was gathered, celebrating me. It was perfect. "I hope you liked the wine, Mom," Marcus said, smiling warmly as he poured me a glass. I looked at my daughter-in-law, Allison, who sat across from me. She smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile that reached her eyes. It was tight, almost forced. I'd seen that smile before. It was the one she gave when she was either nervous or hiding something. And for some reason, that night, it felt like she was hiding something from me. She raised her glass, clinking it against mine, but there was a hesitation. For a moment, I could have sworn her fingers trembled. "To family," she said, her voice a little too smooth. The clinking of the glasses around the table was almost drowned by the sound of my heartbeat. There was something in the air that I couldn't place. The tension, it felt too real. The unexpected warning dinner continued without incident. Marcus was his usual cheerful self, chatting about his work, telling funny stories about the people at the office. It should have been a perfect evening, but something gnawed at me. I noticed Allison's eyes flicking toward Marcus every time he spoke to me, her gaze following him a little too carefully. She wasn't listening to me. She wasn't even looking at me. Every time Marcus turned away, her expression softened into something almost calculating, like she was waiting for something to happen. I brushed the thought away as paranoia. It was my birthday, after all. Nothing was wrong, right? That's when it happened. One of the waitresses, a young woman with dark brown hair tied in a neat ponytail, approached our table. She moved as though she had somewhere else to be, but there was something about the way she leaned in towards me that caught my attention. Without a word, she subtly slid a small, folded piece of paper next to my plate, brushing her fingers lightly across it, as if it was nothing more than an accidental gesture. My heart skipped a beat. I watched her, but she quickly turned away and walked toward the kitchen. My gaze stayed on her as she disappeared into the crowd of waitstaff, my mind racing. What was that? What had just happened? The notai quickly glanced down at the paper, hoping that I hadn't imagined it. It was just a folded napkin. I could have dismissed it as a random accident, but there was something in the way the waitress had handed it to me, as though it were a secret she needed to keep. I couldn't help myself. I folded the napkin open under the table, my hands trembling as I revealed the note. "Don't drink that. Your life is in danger. Trust me." The words were scrawled hastily, almost as if the writer had no time to finish. There was no signature, no further explanation, just those chilling words that rang louder and louder in my head with each passing second. I looked at my glass of wine. I had been about to drink it, but now it seemed ... different. The wine I had been savoring now looked sinister, tainted. My stomach turned, and a cold sweat broke out on the back of my neck. I quickly slipped the note into my pocket, my thoughts racing. What did this mean? Who was this waitress? Why would she warn me? I stood up, my hands shaking as I excused myself from the table. The restroom, a moment to think. Kai walked briskly toward the restroom, my heart hammering in my chest. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and fears. What if this was a joke? What if someone was trying to play a prank on me? But no, the waitress's eyes had been too urgent, too desperate for this to be a joke. I locked myself in the restroom and reread the note. This wasn't just a casual warning. Someone wanted me to know something dangerous. As I stared at my reflection in the mirror, I made a decision. I wasn't going to drink that wine. But what was I going to do next? I had to be sure. I had to be absolutely certain. The switch, the immediate consequence. When I returned to the table, I tried to act normal. I took my seat again, trying to ignore the growing sense of panic rising inside me. My hands were still trembling. Marcus was still talking, and Allison was staring at me, her smile frozen in place. It was as though she was watching me, waiting for me to do something. I looked down at my glass, then at Allison's, her glass. I studied it carefully, the dark wine swirling inside. The waitress's words echoed in my mind. Your life is in danger. I wasn't sure what exactly was happening, but I knew I couldn't take any chances. When Marcus turned to speak to the waiter, I seized the opportunity. Without a second thought, I swapped my glass with Allison's. It was a small move, but I felt my pulse quicken as I did it. Allison wouldn't notice. She never did. I raised my glass, feeling the weight of the moment settle in my chest. To family, I said, my voice calm but my heart pounding. Everyone raised their glasses, and Allison, unaware of the swap, took a drink. The unforeseen disaster. 5 minutes passed. At first, nothing happened. We continued to eat, and the conversation flowed as easily as before. But I could feel the tension rising inside me. I couldn't help but watch Allison, her eyes darting from Marcus to the table. She seemed off, twitching with nervous energy. And then it happened. Allison suddenly pressed a hand to her stomach. Her face contorted in confusion, a wave of discomfort crossing her features. I feel a little funny, she muttered, her voice faint. Marcus immediately turned, concern flashing across his face. Are you okay, honey? She nodded, but I could see that her hands were trembling now, not nervously this time, but from something far worse. Sweat began to bead on her forehead, and her skin began to pale. She gripped the table, her knuckles turning white as panic flashed in her eyes. The scene before me was unfolding like something out of a nightmare. I had to act fast. The truth unveiled. Marcus immediately stood, supporting her as she tried to rise. Call 911, I shouted, my voice unnervingly calm considering the situation. The restaurant was in chaos. Servers rushed to assist, and people started standing up, murmuring in confusion. A woman's life was in danger, and I couldn't help but wonder, what if it had been me? As I watched Allison writhe in pain, her eyes glazing over, I finally understood the true meaning of the note, the investigation. Connecting the dots, it wasn't long before paramedics arrived, and Allison was rushed to the hospital. I was in a daze, the events of the evening playing over in my head like a movie. But what was really going on here? As I sat in the waiting room with Marcus, trying to keep my composure, I couldn't shake the thought, why had she been so eager to drink the wine? Hours later, the doctor came to speak with us. Allison was stable, but the doctors had found something troubling in her system, toxins. They couldn't identify exactly what it was yet, but they were sure it wasn't just food poisoning. My mind raced back to the note. Could it be possible that someone had tried to poison me, and I had stopped it in time? The Revelation family betrayal. It was only after a few days of investigation that the truth began to unravel. The doctors had run tests, and they found traces of cardiac medication in Allison's system, medications that weren't prescribed to her. In fact, they had been given to her with malicious intent. Further digging revealed that Marcus's wife had been trying to manipulate our family finances, hoping to gain control of my assets once I was deemed mentally incapable. But that wasn't all. The most shocking revelation came when we found a series of messages on Allison's phone, all pointing to a carefully planned scheme to take my life without anyone suspecting her.